Welcome in Nexters at home and abroad. Thank you for joining. I'm Mark Halperin, editor-in-chief of the live interactive video platform Two-Way, and your guide to everything that is next up on the program today. Two great talkers, Rich Lowry, the editor of the National Review, and Emily Jashinsky, host of The After Party here on the MK Media Network. And then the one, the only, Michael Smerconish, a truly great talker, will join us here. Very excited. And then starting off in a moment, my reported monologue today, because I've been talking a lot to Democrats to try to figure out what is wrong with their brand. Poll after poll shows the same thing. The Democratic Party at a low point. And I'm wondering whose fault that is. Why is the party have such a low approval ratings? Is it Joe Biden's fault, Kamala Harris, Bernie Sanders, someone else? I'm amazed that so few people in the press, including people who love the Democrats, and so few Democrats are talking about why the party is in that position. Why are the poll numbers for the party so bad? If this were the Republican Party and their brand were down so low, you can bet the media would be analyzing historically, in terms of policy, in terms of current practices, why the numbers are so bad. And to start to answer this question, you have to figure out how far back should we go on this, right? Does this go back to Bill Clinton, to Barack Obama? Is it a more recent phenomenon? What is the trajectory here? And then the other question I think you have to answer is this because of Donald Trump? Is it more the Democrats' own doing, or is it because of Donald Trump? So I'm going to explore that based on the conversations I've had with Democrats, some Republicans, some independent analysts. What is the connection between the rise and success of Donald Trump over the last decade and the parallel decline and weakness of the Democratic Party? Now, when I ask people that question, I generally get one of three reactions. If I ask somebody who has Trump derangement syndrome that question, they say, well, Trump is a total failure, so it's a silly question. There's no need to think about the connection between Donald Trump's success and the decline of the Democratic brand because Trump's a failure. If I ask people who have MAGA plasma racing through their bloodstream, they say, well, Trump is brilliant, and so 80% of this is his doing, 20% is the stupidity and destructive nature of the people on the left and their tendencies to destroy themselves. Now, if I ask people of an analytical bent, I think they give me the correct answer, which is there is a very big connection between the two, but it is difficult to quantify it. It's very, though, important to understand. There's no doubt that Donald Trump has had failures over the last 10 years. Of course, he lost the 2020 election. But there's also no doubt that he's won twice and that right now he's dominating our politics and that Democrats are in trouble. Trump's poll numbers aren't great, but they're better than the Democrats. And I ask Democrats all the time, the worse you think Trump is, the stupider you think he is, the more ineffective, the more out of step with public opinion, the more you must think your own party is a catastrophe because you're losing to this guy. He's got better poll numbers than the Democrats do. Now, I think this is a topic that's worthy of a book or at least a 5,000-word essay someplace like the Atlantic magazine or wherever. Don't have time for this now, but I will lay out what I think would be a pretty good book. This storyline, this dynamic is, to me, the framework for what is the best explanation for what's happened in our politics in the last decade, maybe more. And I think it's also the biggest clue to what's going to happen next. Beyond winning 2 of the last 3 presidential elections, Trump has accomplished a lot. There's stuff that he's accomplished that you may not think are great, but they're things he set out to do. He just got the trade deal with Europe, trade deal with Japan. He's presided over an economy where the NASDAQ and the S&P are way up. Inflation is not fully tamed, but it's lower than it was under the previous president. Passed the tax cut bill. Lots of investment coming in from the private sector, both American companies and overseas. Again, achieved goals that conservatives have wanted for a long time. Gotten rid of DEI, not just from the public sector, but forced a lot of private companies to get rid of it. Scaling down lots of government departments, including the Department of Education. Changed the way the ability of trans athletes to participate in women's sports. Gotten the Ivy League colleges, many of them, to change their policies. Successfully bombed Iran's nuclear facilities, and many other things. And I'll add to the list NATO, getting NATO countries to pony up more money. Now, again, some of these things are only positive in the eyes of Trump backers, but I think there are 4 things at least that are objectively in the interest of the United States. One would be immigration, controlling the border. That Trump has clearly in this area, and all 4 of the areas I'm going to list, he's clearly done some things that people rightly say are overstep, that these policies have some downsides. But Controlling the border is something that's in the national interest, something a majority of the Americans want. Trump has created a spectacle, but he's also shifted the paradigm on what it takes to close the border and how effective it can be. Number two, tariffs. Okay. Trump has changed the paradigm there too. Lots of these countries now are doing what the United States wants. The coverage this week of the deal with the EU, favorable to the United States, favorable to Trump. Even news organizations that don't normally say positive things about Trump have said this is in the United States' interest. Trump got a good deal out of this. And again, the goal is clear. He wants to re-engineer global trade by leveraging the U.S. market and other American advantages without hurting the American or global economy. Right now, that appears on track. It's early. These deals are not fleshed out yet. But I'll say again, this is another area of a Trump achievement in the national interest. Other presidents didn't do it, just like closing the border. And Democrats just pretend it's just a total failure. Same with number three, controlling the size of the workforce. Trump has turbocharged the capacity of a White House to control the size of the bureaucracy. He already has eliminated a lot of positions. He plans to eliminate more. This concept that we've had for decades that the federal government's just going to keep growing, he's figured out a way to change that. Again, popular, not in every respect, overreach in some areas, but this is another area that Democrats are simply criticizing. Finally, as I mentioned before, NATO, where Trump has ensured that terms and conditions apply now to be a member. He's changed the relationship from one where the European countries were free riding and freeloading to one now that's more transactional. It's a post-globalist arrangement in which the alliance can live on, but on terms that are far more favorable to the United States. Now, again, I say again, in each case, there are objectively downsides to what Trump has done. But I'll say also in each case that overall, these directionally are positive and popular. And no other recent president has had the requisite desire or drive to change the status quo in such a fundamental way. In this country, the Democrats simply accentuate the downsides of these achievements. They find and highlight the weak links, and there are weak links, rather than grappling with what's actually happening that I think is more important, that the trends in this country in terms of public opinion have fueled Trump's rise in capacity to get stuff done. Trump has understood where public opinion was on these issues and others. And the Democratic Party has been and largely remains clueless. Okay. This is to me fundamental if you're thinking about the connection between what Trump has done and what's happened with the Democratic Party. And it's not just in the United States. Trump has read the mood of where things are and these issues and others. And the Democrats have failed. The American left has failed on these and other issues. So if you look at Europe and the other industrialized democracies in the West, you see the same conditions that have grown over decades that have caused a rebellion against the parties on the left. Out of control mass migration, out of control crime, the dominant influence of wokeness and all sorts of cultural institutions. The LGBTQ changes that many have seen as overreach, particularly in the area of trans. Censorship, overregulation, cancellation, neo-socialism, all these things exist in other countries. Kim Strassel has written about what's happened to the United States in the Wall Street Journal. Very good focus that most Democrats haven't even thought about. Open borders, unrestrained spending, supports for teachers' unions when they're acting antithetical to the interest of our kids. An obsessive focus on climate change, bashing the police, being against Israel, the dominance of identity politics. All of this has caused Democrats in this country to lose support from demographic groups, independent of Donald Trump, although Trump has taken advantage of that. Imagine if the Republicans were losing support from interest groups that had long been a bedrock of their electoral success. Imagine if the reverse were happening, how much the media would cover it. This is a massive story. Democrats losing support from voters of color, from younger voters, massive. Now, Trump is singular. All these other industrialized democracies, they have the same issues. But what's different is they haven't found their version of Trump. There have been kind of poor man's versions of Trump, but they haven't succeeded. They haven't had Trump's skill. They haven't had Trump's level of aggressiveness, tough enough and determined enough to take on the old order. So what's happened to these other countries with their left parties, their equivalents of the Democratic Party, is they're weaker than they were before, but they're not crushed. They haven't declined as precipitously in most cases the way the Democratic Party has. who is now as low as they've been in poll after poll. I'm thinking about this stuff, and I talk to some Democrats who are, but very few prominent Democrats, whether you're talking about people in elective office, you're talking about activists or writers or people in think tanks, they're not even vaguely grappling with this problem in public. Why? Because they fear that the activist left will push them out of the party or cancel them. And because most of them lack the creativity and self-awareness that's required to say, how did this happen? How far back has this been going on? Some of these trends go well before Donald Trump's rise. When the few Democrats do tepidly and timidly put their toe in the water and say, what have we done wrong? They do it in a way that doesn't really give voice to a full analysis of what's happened and what needs to happen next. Because they're afraid, as I said, of being canceled by the left. They're afraid of being out of step with the activist wing of the party. So Neera Tanden, a liberal, advisor to Hillary Clinton, advisor to Joe Biden, one of the smartest people in the Democratic Party, in my experience, very knowledgeable. She wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal, not in the Washington Post, not in the New York Times, but in the Journal, a conservative editorial page. And she admitted that the Biden administration that she was part of, a big part of it, in advising on domestic policy, screwed up on the Mexican border. And she called for comprehensive immigration reform. She rightly, in her piece, put in sharp relief all the unpopular elements of President Trump's immigration policies, because some of the things Donald Trump has done are unpopular on the border. But she also felt compelled to call for a path to citizenship for some of the people in this country illegally. That is known by many Americans as amnesty. And she criticized other elements of what Donald Trump has done to try to stay on the good side of her liberal wing of her party. If the Democrats can't figure out how to lead with being tough in 2028, whoever the Republicans nominate, whether it's Vance or somebody else, they'll make mincemeat of the Democrats. In Trump world, they laugh at how even now, even after Donald Trump's victory in 2024 was clearly fueled in large part by immigration, they laugh at how much the Democrats still don't have a clue on immigration and a range of other issues. Then you think about New York City and the nomination by the Democrats of Mr. Mamdani to be their mayoral candidate. The reaction to that, again, reveals how clueless far too many Democrats are about what his election would mean for their brand. Republicans are salivating at the notion of having Donald Trump be able to run against Mamdani and campaign against him if he's the mayor of New York City. Now, there are people in Trump's orbit who don't want him to win because they think he'd ruin the city, and some of them have pretty big investments in New York. So there's cross pressure there. But on the left, they continue to not grapple with what it would mean to elect someone with Mamdani's background and stated positions on the economy and law enforcement, a range of other issues. There was an op-ed piece in the New York Times by a woman named Tressie McMillan Cottom. She argued that the opposition to Mamdani is based pretty much solely on his racial heritage, rather than say the fact that he's a socialist. Okay. New York Post story this week talked about how so many prominent people in the party, in the Republican Party, plan to make Mamdani the face of the Democrats. And then you have people like Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, the leading Democrats in Congress, both from New York City, Kathy Hochul, the mayor of New York, the governor of New York. They know how dangerous this is politically for the party. They're really worried about it. But except for the fact that none of those three have publicly endorsed Mamdani yet, they're frozen in amber because the base does not want to see them be outspoken against the nominee. And they're worried that he may win. But they're not doing anything, at least overtly, to stop his march to victory. Who can solve this for the Democrats? Who can speak out thoughtfully? I don't think the current Democratic Party chair, Ken Martin, or the past party leaders, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, these folks are not well positioned to try to stop Donald Trump on his march to achieving more, or to do the other task that needs to be done in parallel, rebuild their party's brand, to try to come up with policies and ideas and messengers that could really make a difference. Okay. Trump's going to continue to have success and failures. The Democrats may do very well in the midterms. They may well. But in each case where Trump may have failure, I don't think it has much to do with the Democrats having a capacity to affirmatively and assertively meet the moment, to rethink why voters are so down on their brand, to change their image on the economy, on social issues. Because based on all the available evidence, the Democrats actually, right now, are on worse shape than the polling suggests, because the polling is a snapshot of where we are. They're running out of time. Again, because of the nature of the midterms, because we don't know where the economy will be, we don't know what's going to happen with the Epstein story, it's possible that the Democrats will have a good 2026. But the Democrats I talk to are far less worried about 2026 in the midterms, because this history suggests that even weak, the party could still do well enough to take back the House. What they're worried about is 2028. What they're worried about is the capacity of the party to redefine itself and to win back voters they'll need to win the White House, particularly because they are a party right now without strong candidates. The Democratic brand on its own right now, it appears to be on the wrong side of both the polling and of the history. And that's a big problem. It's a big problem to be on the wrong side of polling and of history. You think back to, where did this start to go wrong? As I said, some of these trends have been around forever. But what's, to me, in talking to the smartest Democrats I know, what to me is their biggest concern is not the history, but the future. How can they fix this when so many of the dynamics on social issues, teachers' unions, the economy, immigration, government spending, relationship with NATO, on so many of these issues, there's no reflection about where things went wrong. And it's very hard for Democrats to criticize Donald Trump and praise him, because if you give him any praise, think about in the first term with the Abraham Accords, ask any Democrat privately, what do you think of the Abraham Accords? Privately, they'll say fantastic. Ask them what they think about shutting down the border. Most of them will say, great, huge accomplishment. But in our polarized red-blue America now, it's very hard for either party to praise. And you take heat from the base if you praise Donald Trump, and they're worried about what Donald Trump would do with that praise. But a realistic appraisal shows that Democrats are not getting on the right side of these issues. We're on the wrong side of public opinion, the wrong side of history. These other industrialized democracies, their liberal parties, have survived because they haven't faced Trump. And I'll say again, if you think Trump is a bad political athlete, you're making a mistake. Trump has lots of unpopular policy positions, but he knows how to mitigate them better than the Democrats know how to mitigate theirs. And he fights to get on the right side of issues when he's on the wrong side. Democrats, for instance, are counting on being on the right side of Medicaid and Medicaid spending and people on health care. Trump's not going to sit back passively and be on the wrong side of that. He'll do whatever he can, as much as he needs to change. The Democrats have not shown the same level of awareness, the same level of nimbleness. And so I say, again, this question, how did the Democrats go wrong? And there's plenty of other things we could list. We've talked about some of them here, trying to block Bernie Sanders from winning the nomination in 2016 and 2020, trying to keep Bobby Kennedy off the ballot, lawfare against Trump. There's a whole range of things that are kind of episodic that Democrats did, in part because of Trump derangement syndrome, in part because they were too wedded to the establishment of their party. It's a long list, but the core of the list is being on the right side of the issues that matter to the American people. I still rarely find any Democrats who can speak with passion about how they got on the wrong side of the issue of trans athletes and girls and women's sports. Rarely. They continue to drift back towards the ideological base of the party, which is still not taking into account the thoughts of the majority of the parents in this country on that issue. Same with all the issues related to COVID. Same with all the issues related to the economy, or most of them anyway. This party continues to struggle, and the clock ticks. The clock ticks. They're still more in denial and justification mode than they are in thinking anew. And they're up against a guy in Donald Trump, even though he's a lame duck, who understands this dynamic exactly. He knows where the weak parts are in the Democrats, and he knows where public opinion is. We'll keep watching it. All right, tell me what you think about my monologue today. You can send me an email, nextuphalperin@gmail.com. You can find the program always on X and Instagram and TikTok at the handles at nextuphalperin. Don't forget, watch us on YouTube or listen to us. If you want to watch us, youtube.com/@nextuphalperin. And always, always listen to us as a podcast wherever you get your finer podcasts. All right, next up, joining us here, Rich Lowry and Emily Jashinsky. They'll join me to talk about a very, very serious topic, Sydney Sweeney's jeans and other stuff in the news. And then a little bit later, Michael Smerconish will be here. Stand by. There's a lot more right here next up. Well, ever since Donald Trump was sworn in for his second term, his administration has been moving at a breakneck pace. They're moving mountains for their cause quickly, but they can't manage your personal savings. That is up to you. One of the smartest ways to protect your financial future is through diversification, especially with gold, from my trusted friends at Birch Gold Group. In the past 12 months, gold's value has jumped 40%. Central banks now are buying it at record levels. Global instability is at its highest in decades. That's why Birch Gold makes owning physical gold incredibly easy, and it's an incredible opportunity for you. You can convert an existing IRA or a 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA backed by physical gold, or you can simply buy gold to store securely at your home in a safe. Just text NEXT to the number 989898, and the folks at Birch Gold will send you a free info kit about gold. There's no obligation, only some useful information. With their A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau and tens of thousands of very happy customers, you can join them. Take control of your savings today. Text the word NEXT to 989898. Next up, two geniuses. They won't be embarrassed that I'm calling them geniuses. Rich Lowry, editor of the National Review, Emily Jashinsky, host of the After Party here on the MK Media Network. Welcome in to both of you. Thank you for joining.
Hey, Mark.
Rich, what's the finest after party you've ever been to?
Ooh. Finest after party. I don't know. Maybe it was back in the day at the White House Correspondents' Dinner. What was it? Was it the Bloomberg party that was a huge to do? Maybe that. But I'm not a huge after party guy, I have to admit.
Yeah,
or my after party days are behind me.
You do like s'mores and a martini glass, I've heard. You'd eat that. And Emily, if you could interview the ghost of William F. Buckley, what would you ask him?
Oh, I'd ask him about Rich Lowry's best after party.
Yeah, very meta. Yeah. All right, grateful to you both being here. Just want to run through some stuff in the news. If I asked, this is a hypothetical, Emily, you first. If you were president of the United States and I said to you, based on the crimes for which he was committed, would you consider a pardon for Ghislaine Maxwell? What would you say?
I would say, in the interest of the victims and the American public that cares about justice in this case, there's no pardon coming for Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, that's not what the president has said.
Pardon. Well, you'll see that in a second. Rich, what would you say if I asked you if you'd pardon her if you were president?
Absolutely not. I mean, it would just be so perverse that Epstein got this sweetheart deal, almost inexplicable. I mean, it's part of the reasons there's so much conspiracy theories around this case in the 05-08 timeframe, then dies in prison, kills himself to escape justice. Then his right-hand associate gets pardoned after being found guilty and sentenced 20. That would be just mind-boggling.
Mind-boggling. So here is a brief history of what the president has said in the past, not in the recent days, about a pardon. But here's what he said about Maxwell in the past. Roll tape.
I don't know. I haven't really been following it too much. I just wish her well, frankly. I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach. But I wish her well.
Friend or boyfriend, Epstein, was either killed or committed suicide in jail. She's now in jail. Yeah, I wish her well. I'd wish you well. I'd wish a lot of people well. I do wish her well. I'm not looking for anything bad for her. I'm not looking bad for anybody.
A lot of tells there if you're a student of Trump. Now, here's what he said in recent days about the prospects of a pardon.
Are you still disappointed in President Trump?
Well, I don't want to talk about that.
Consider a pardon or a commutation for Ghislaine Maxwell if she's cooperating?
It's something I haven't thought about. It's really something. It's something I'm allowed to do it, but it's something I have not thought about. Well, I'm allowed to give her a pardon, but nobody's approached me with it. Nobody's asked me about it. A lot of people are asking me about pardons. Obviously, this is no time to be talking about pardons. But a lot of people have asked about pardon. This is just not a time to be talking about pardons.
So, Emily, his posture towards her differs from what you and Rich said would be your posture if you were president. What's your best theory about why he's given, over time, very positive answers or neutral answers about Maxwell?
Yeah, I mean, people could, write 10,000 word articles on the different theories about why he's had a different posture towards Maxwell. Obviously, they've known each other stretching back a long time. Trump actually mentioned yesterday that his falling out with Jeffrey Epstein, this is according to his telling, was because Epstein was stealing employees from Donald Trump. I don't know what that means in particular, but we do know that Virginia Giuffre, one of the victims, who also doesn't have a 100% track record of truth telling, obviously, but clearly somebody who was in the Epstein circle, was recruited by Ghislaine Maxwell from Mar-a-Lago. So there's a sort of obvious take here that he wants Ghislaine Maxwell. He's been telegraphing to Ghislaine Maxwell to protect him, given what she may know about Donald Trump, or to protect people around him that he's been trying to protect by not releasing new information or significant new information in this case. So, when you have the Deputy Attorney General interviewing her in prison and the president talking like this, she's not really a pardon-worthy. Nobody has the appetite for a deal to be cut with Ghislaine Maxwell. One final thought is people tend to forget that Maxwell herself is accused by victims of engaging in some of the same sexual abuse, not just grooming, but actually engaging in some of the same sexual abuse. She has many, many accusers herself.
Yeah, the federal courts, the jury have said she engaged in horrible activity. Rich, you're an intellectual, you're a policy heavyweight, but you're also one of the best students of Trump I know, and you write about him and his proclivities in terms of politics as well as anyone I know. Besides the interpretation that he's spoken fondly and favorably about her to make sure she doesn't go after him, is there another interpretation of why Trump is talked about Maxwell this way that you can think of?
I don't know. You listen to some of the statements and you're like, okay, yeah, he is going to pardon her, because that's the kind of thing he says. Well, I haven't thought about it, but I could. Yeah.
But people are asking me about it.
Yeah. So I just don't believe, Mark, that there's some deep, dark secret that Trump was engaged in abuse of minors with Epstein, and we've had no indication of it to this point. After two huge indictments, the indictment of Epstein himself, then the indictment of Maxwell, and the trial, where she had every incentive to spill her guts then, right? She was looking down the barrel of a guilty charge that could put her away for the rest of her life, right? So why would she, be able to give up Donald Trump or Bill Gates or whoever and not do it then? And then also there's so much investigative material that exists. There have been all these lawsuits from victims, and we've just never heard anything plausible about Donald Trump. So it may be that what he fears is more Wall Street Journal level disclosures, with that a letter or alleged birthday letter, where it's just embarrassing because he was chummy with the guy for a long time prior to 2004, when for whatever reason he totally cut him off. So he just doesn't want her saying, oh yeah, I was with this party with Donald and Epstein and they joked about this, or that level of disclosure, which would be embarrassing, but is not like a major scandal or a reason for him to want to cover this all up. That would be my guess, but I don't know.
Yeah. So my guess is along the lines of yours, but it's maybe a little bit further than what you said, more than just embarrassing joking, but that I'm amazed at how little we know about the contours of their relationship, and more generally about how did Epstein interact with rich and powerful men? What were their activities? It's alleged that there was a child sex trafficking ring. I find relatively little information about what that entailed, right? But the idea that there were parties and that there were activities both on the island, in his Manhattan home, et cetera, we just don't know. At least I don't know what the contours of that were. And I think the victims have made some accusations, but they're not very detailed. And certainly none of them involve Donald Trump, except there are two on the record accounts that involve Trump and Epstein together. That, is it the worst thing Donald Trump's ever been accused of? It's not. But my suspicion is that there's more of that, not necessarily illegal, but unseemly with a monster, right? Mm-hmm. It's unseemly with a monster. Emily, we'll close up on Epstein. Just what are you waiting to see? Besides, if Maxwell testifies, what are you waiting to see develop?
Well, yeah, I mean, Senate Democrats are looking for recordings, actually, of Todd Blanche's meetings with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was spotted by the press coming in and out of those meetings carrying boxes. So right now, I'm looking to hear more about what Maxwell told Todd Blanche in at least 2 days of meetings at this point when he was questioning her. I think that's a significant, urgent question. And the Deputy Attorney General says they're planning on providing that information when it's appropriate, but I don't think anybody right now is holding their breath for this Department of Justice to be the good sort of steward of what is deemed appropriate information on an appropriate timeline.
Yeah. Rich, people in the political analyst racket often make the prediction that a certain story will bedevil Trump or divide MAGA or won't go away. I'm not so sure about this one. Do you think this story will be alive in the fall?
I'm not sure. It feels a little summery, like a summer kind of scandal or attempted scandal. But I don't think there'll be enough disclosures ever to satisfy anyone. I do think there is a chance of a Republican revolt. I think the whole MAGA split thing is way overdone. It is influential MAGA voices, but is it real MAGA voters out there who are, deciding how they feel about Trump based on this? I think no. So I think maybe it does go into the fall, but it's not like a thermonuclear story.
Yeah. All right. Switching topics, but just closing by saying something I know we all agree with. Whatever occurs, the victims and their rights and their feelings and their futures should be front and center and paramount to however this story proceeds. All right. Democratic Party. Rich, start with you. If you're writing a book about how the Democrats ended up with a brand that's at a low point in modern history, who would you want to interview for that book, and what would you ask them to try to figure out how this happened?
Well, I'd talk to the Biden people about how the theory of the case they had in 2020 that the Democratic Party was not crazy and their traditional Obama Democrats still were the main force, and if you appealed to them, you could win, was correct, right? And even though he seemed dead and was embarrassed in the initial contest, he survives and wins on that basis. And how do they immediately get co-opted by the left and decide to go as far left as plausible? Not as far left as some people would wanted them to go, but as politically plausible far left as they could. And then I'd want to talk to all the leaders of these various interest groups on issues like trans and on immigration that have been hugely influential in dragging the party their way when push comes to shove on policy. And they just need to give a little on some of these cultural issues, need to say, look, it's a good thing the border shut down. Say, look, as Gavin did, at least briefly in that interview with podcast with Charlie Kirk, look, guys shouldn't compete against girls in sports. Just to show, the cliched sister soldier type moment, to show they get it and they're not radically left on the culture. I'm not sure they can do that, or they're going to do that anytime soon. If they can't, they have a pretty dismal future ahead of them.
Yeah. Emily, who would you want to talk to? What specific people would you want to interview to get to the bottom of how this happened?
I was hoping you'd turn that question my way, Mark, because as Rich was talking, I was thinking Bill Clinton. In all honesty, Bill Clinton. Yeah. And James Carville also has been calling some of this stuff out for a couple of years. Nina Turner last year during the DNC said something I thought was pretty brave, which is that there's a sort of emasculation to the Democratic Party brand, especially towards black men. But Clinton, Carville, Turner, these are people who saw it coming. And we're trying to sound warnings about it. Clinton famously was worried about his own wife's campaign back in 2016, not resonating with people in sort of so-called flyover states, because it was too sort of academic and it was too faculty lounge focused. And I think some of that is just sort of really obvious. The other very obvious answer is Joe Rogan, who himself was a left-leaning, Democratic-leaning guy who swung for MAGA. And he's been pretty open about why that happened. But further interrogations of people like Rogan, I think, would just confirm the thesis that Clinton, Carville, Nina Turner have been articulating for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
great
key
list.
thing about Bill Clinton, Mark, right, is he grew up in Arkansas politics when Arkansas was a Democratic state, but a culturally conservative state, and he knew you had to play defense on hot button cultural issues, and that's just embedded in his DNA in a way it's not among a lot of other Democrats. I know a Republican governor who saw Bill Clinton at a funeral of a political dignitary, and this governor's wife was saying, "You got to go say hi to Bill Clinton." He's like, "I don't want to talk to Bill Clinton." Then he goes up and talk to him, and Clinton first thing he says, "You've done such a great job on opioids, and isn't it crazy what's happening at the border?" Right, like immediately connecting with this Republican, and that's just an indispensable skill the Democrats have lost.
Yeah, so let's talk about that exact point, because my experience with some of these elected, some Democratic governors, some senators, is they see what's happening. They see that the party, defund the police, not talking about closing the border, trans issues. They see it. And yet they're afraid to speak out because, as I mentioned earlier in the show, they're afraid of being canceled. Right. So what's whether you've got a historical analogy or just an understanding of human beings, like what's it going to take for some more Democrats to not be afraid to speak out? Is it going to have to get worse? Are there particular people who might run for president who you think will build their campaign around it? Like, how does that happen that more Democrats speak out and say, we've got to stop the madness?
Well, I think it takes an unquenchable thirst to win. Sorry, go ahead, Emily.
I was just going to say, like Rahm Emanuel, for example, said what he said on Megyn's show last week, and then said, I'm probably going to have to go into witness protection after this. But what we've learned, I think, since he said that, is Rahm Emanuel, Gavin Newsom, for example, they are in this lane where they're less concerned about upsetting quote unquote woke people because they want those donors who know that there's a problem, and they're going to try to build organic, and maybe Newsom is not correct to lump into this category. I think he flirted with steering into that lane. But they want those donors. They want the media coverage of people who think that they're Alyssa Slotkin, who they're trying to address a very real problem. But that's going to be a different lane from the progressive, the Zohran Mamdani, who has just tried not to talk about the culture war issues, even though he has a record of being very, very quote unquote woke on the culture issues. So I think we're going to see a split as 2028 gets closer of people who are really adamantly anti quote unquote woke and people who are just trying not to talk about it.
But no one who's going hard at it?
No.
Rich, I tell young people that Bill Clinton, when he ran for president in 1992, supported the death penalty, which was against the Democratic Party orthodoxy, supported right to work laws, supported welfare reform, supported free trade, all of which were antithetical to the Democratic Party's positions. And in today's Democratic Party, we'd have gotten him canceled. But he wasn't. And there's a school of Democrats, including a lot who work for President Clinton, who say that's the model. You got to find positions that are popular and put your stake in the ground and just sister soldier your way to the nomination, which, as you said, will be predicated on believing that the electorate's hungry to win. Yeah. Is the Democratic Party's cancellation mode so strong now that that's people are silly to look at that model, or is that still the right model?
I think still a version of it is right. Now, one thing about presidential politics, Mark, right, is everyone who succeeds figures out a new way of doing it. No one succeeds doing it some other person's way. It's true of Clinton at the time, George W. Bush as well, certainly Obama, certainly Trump. So it'll be a person who's fresh and has a new and different theory. But part of it will be, as I said, an unquenchable thirst to win, which is a key part of Clinton, right? The ambition. He wanted to get there, and then a realization that some distance from the left and getting attacked from the left is a good thing, which is we just haven't seen a lot of that. And I think it's people on the left are afraid of being called haters, even by people that they consider crazy. They're not used to it the way people on the right are. It's very uncomfortable for them. If they suddenly become the man. I think this is part of the reason that institutions of elite culture have been taken over by their young, woke employees in many instances. They just, decent, honest liberals just don't like being called racist or being called part of the power structure. So you need someone who just has a strong hide in that way, doesn't have that reflex, and really, really wants to win.
Emily, you mentioned Nina Turner in this question of men. Are there issues on which the Democratic Party can get right with men and maybe outflank the Trump Republican Party, or are they consigned, at least while Trump is on the stage, to be the mommy party?
I also think so much of this, it's like less about policy and it's more the way they talk about culture and the way that they talk about, how often have we heard the glossy mags refer to quote unquote toxic masculinity over the last decade? Yeah. That gets, I think, rightfully assigned to or ascribed to Democrats. And when you see just the way that leading with identity, and Kamala Harris was sort of careful about this, but the people around her weren't, and the media wasn't, and didn't do her any favors. She wasn't talking about how she would be the first Black woman president and ad nauseum, but I think that stuff people around her were talking about, and I do think that stuff, it makes people feel like they're getting morally blackmailed for not supporting the first Black female president, and so I don't even think it's necessarily a policy, although I would argue, tariffs and reindustrialization and some of that would be important. But it's just the way that they speak in this faculty lounge language is female coded because it comes across as like anti blue collar, anti-populist.
Yeah. All right. Just when I think woke has reached the end of the road, couldn't be more outrageous, a story pops up that I'm still having trouble comprehending because it seems so insane. Now, I'm going to put you both on the spot. Truisms are generally true. Tell me a truism that you think is, as it pertains to the human condition, is just as true as anything could possibly be. Rich.
Sydney Sweeney is hot.
All right, that's not a truism. I'm looking for a truism. We're talking about Sydney Sweeney, but I'm looking for a truism. Like a fish rots from the head, or, something. You got something that you think is just
a really true truism?
Yeah, like one that explains humanity 100% accurately.
Oh, I don't know whether it's a truism, but people act in their self-interest is a pretty bedrock aspect of human nature.
All right, Emily, I'm looking for like an aphorism. You got one that comes to mind? Like a fish rots from the head.
Yeah, let's go with absolute power corrupts absolutely.
There you go. That's an excellent one. Now, here's a 2-word one. Sex sells. Here's a new ad campaign for jeans, like your denim jeans, from the actress Sydney Sweeney.
My body's composition is determined by my genes. Hey, eyes up here.
Sydney Sweeney has great genes.
Yeah. Now, my criticism of this American Eagle ad campaign is it's the most unoriginal thing ever, the wordplay on jeans and jeans. Mm-hmm. But the amount of publicity this has gotten because of the backlash from the left and the capacity of people to talk about it. Here's 4 folks from the San Francisco ABC affiliate talking about this ad campaign, and get ready to cringe, everyone.
Can we just bring some sanity to this, okay? Here's a company that's trying to sell jeans. Sydney Sweeney is pretty. They're using a pretty woman to sell their product. End of story. There's nothing else going on here, in my opinion.
I agree with you 100%, Larry. I mean, I think you can say anybody can have great genes.
Yes.
They're traditionally mainstream beautiful, and that could be someone who's Black or Latino or Asian or Hawaiian, anything. A lot of people have great genes.
Yep. I just think she wasn't reading the room, and I think the company wasn't reading the room. Now's not the time for this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I argue, what if J-Lo would have sold jeans this way?
Yeah,
would anybody have a problem with that?
No.
I don't think so, right? Now, but I do remember, so what makes up somebody who has great genes, right? I mean, like genes, as in Genes, right? Or great DNA. So I remember this biologist reading several years ago saying that actually people like J-Lo, Puerto Ricans, have the best DNA. Because they're so mixed.
Features.
They're so mixed because of the, ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
And health-wise, that could be good.
Oh my goodness. the whole reaction to this has just made me bonkers. Emily, do you understand why people are upset by they're using an attractive actress to sell a product? Do you understand? Can you enunciate it?
Well, I think some of it stems from sheer boredom, first of all, Mark. Secondly, I would say there's this emergent narrative, especially among Gen Z, where they're analyzing a lot of this new pop culture through the lens of like fascism. They see it as, sort of dog whistles or signposts on the road to fascism. And that's been one of the critiques of we talked about this on an after party last night, a couple of different, Jesse Murph and now Sydney Sweeney, that this somehow indicates a cultural vibe shift that's not just healthier towards the center or whatever, because it's not constantly saying, people who are obese, for example, have good genes, whatever it is. I'm going to get in trouble for saying that even, but
there's a safe place for politically incorrect comments. So don't worry.
Good. But it's not just that. It's swinging so far back that it's the Trump vibe shift is taking America straight to fascism.
Rich, is this an ad for jeans with a pretty actress or Nazi propaganda?
Yeah, I mean, Emily's right. It's just there's a whole cottage industry making the most tenuous connections between something happening now and Nazi Germany, right? Trump wants to secure the border. So, the Nazis want to secure borders too. Therefore, we're heading to fascism. So just the word genes obviously is the triggering word here. But it goes to this whole controversy goes to what you were discussing with Emily a minute ago about the problem the Democratic Party and the left has with men, right? This is an insane controversy. I had a political consultant friend down in Florida who was doing focus groups with Latinos prior to the 2020 election. And what they realized slowly is that if you wanted an accurate read of Latino men, you couldn't have them in the same room with their wives and partners and with women, right? You got them to a separate room, then you loosened them up, and you asked the guy, so why do you like Trump? And someone would eventually say, nice family. Everyone's a nice family. And then someone would say, attractive wife, attractive wife. Then someone say, his wife is hot. And I was like, yeah, his wife is hot. That's why we like Trump. But this is the way kind of ordinary people think. That's just totally alien now to a sector of the Democratic Party.
I swear to God, if I were, sometimes I talk about blue booking a book, like no, thinking, just taking the empty sheet of paper and start writing. I swear if I were writing a book about the decline of the Democratic Party and their failure to communicate with real people, I might lead with the Sydney Sweeney thing because it's so insane. It's like I said, when I first heard about the story, I was like, well, I need to see this ad because obviously she's wearing a swastika or she's, there's got to be something in it that suggests an improper use of whatever. And again, jeans, like stupid pun, but not a controversial one. And yet the thing continues to rage. And my Twitter feed, which is not super woke, but I dabble in it to understand all voices. Like people are still up in arms about this ad. It's crazy.
We live in two different worlds.
Yeah. Emily, if people want to consume your content, where can they do that? After Party on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And when is it on? It's on Mondays and Wednesdays live at 10 p.m. Yeah. And you encourage your guests to come with alcohol. Is that correct? Yes, copious amounts of it. Yeah. Rich, where can we find your work? The National Review YouTube channel, the Editor's Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, and nationalreview.com. And are either of you on TikTok? No. No? Really? Rich, you're not on TikTok either? No, I understand why people are, but it is an outlet for Chinese spying, which is a problem. So I'm hoping it gets sold in accordance with the law sometime soon, and then I'll be happy to join. Emily, are you not on TikTok because of your virulent anti-communist tendencies or just too stupid? Well, it started that way, but now I'm so obsessed with Instagram Reels that I can't keep poisoning my mind. Do you ever dance in your kitchen? No. No. Also, no. God forbid. All right, that's part of what your problem is. Very grateful to both of you. Love having you on, and hope you'll come back, Rich and Emily. Thanks, Mark. You. Appreciate it. Thanks, all right, Mark. Next up, the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend. He's all those things and more. Michael Smerconish is next up right after this quick break. So imagine this. What if you could delay your next 2 mortgage payments? That's right. Imagine putting those 2 payments in your pocket and finally getting a little breathing room financially. It's possible when you call the folks at American Financing today. If you're feeling stretched by your everyday expenses, the cost of groceries, gas, all your bills piling up, you are not alone. Most Americans are putting these expenses now on credit cards, and there does not seem to be a way out once you take that route. American Financing, though, can show you how to use your home's equity to pay off that mounting debt. You need to call them. Call American Financing today before you get to a point where you can't make those payments. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are helping homeowners just like you restructure loans and consolidate debt, all without any upfront fees. And their customers are saving an average of $800 a month. That is like $10,000 in a raise. It's fast, it's simple, and it could save your budget this summer. So call now before it's too late. Dial 866-886-2026. Again, that's 866-886-2026. Or go online and visit americanfinancing.net/next. Next up, a man who does 16 hours live every week, but he's not just about quantity. He also does quality. Michael Smerconish is, I believe, one of the finest broadcasters and journalistic thinkers in America. And I have a lot of data points to think that because I appear with him on his program on SiriusXM, the Michael Smerconish program, every Wednesday in the 10 o'clock Eastern Time hour. He also hosts a program on CNN called simply Smerconish. No one thought of the title prior to his grabbing it. Next up here, Michael Smerconish. Michael, welcome.
Thank you. If only I could get the copyright for Smerconish, I'd be wealthy.
You really should. 16 hours live a week. There are people who do roughly that, but that's right up there. Is doing 16 hours live a week hard, or it's what you were born to do and no problem?
Both. In other words, I was born to do it, but it is hard because the 16 hours is the easy part. The hard part is deciding, what am I going to do with those 16 hours? I put far more into the 16 hours than the 16 hours in trying to decide how to fulfill a 3-hour daily live radio program. And then with regard to CNN, I only really get 3 blocks per hour, so 3 blocks per week. And I spend a lot of time thinking about how I want to use that time.
Let's set aside modesty for a moment. And I'd love to know, why are you so good at what you do?
I think I listen, and I'm willing to invest the time to read. I don't speak for a living. I read for a living. In line with what I told you a moment ago, I once interviewed David McCullough. He had just published 1776, and I said to him, how long does it take you to write a book like this? And he said to me, you're asking the wrong question. You should be asking me, how long do I have to sit and think about what it is I'm going to write? Because when the writing part comes, my work is largely over. I never forgot that.
Yeah, it's profound and significant. All right, I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions that start with why, and we'll come back to why your media brand is so unusual in America today. But let's start with Donald Trump. You did a great commentary on CNN last weekend, laying out what you thought Donald Trump should be saying about the Epstein matter. Why is he not following your advice? And first tell people overview what you think he should be saying, and then why you think he's not.
Well, I think he ought to own it. I think that he ought to own those parts that he really can't deny. The idea that Pam Bondi told him in May that his name appears in the files. And by the way, of course his name appears in the files. They were associated. By nature, an investigatory file is probably going to have thousands of names in it. So it would be highly unusual if his name were not in those files. Why would he instead, deny that? I don't get it. I don't believe that the Wall Street Journal made up out of whole cloth the existence of a leather-bound birthday book where they tell you the name of the binder. And I also believe that there's a contribution in the book from Donald Trump. Now, maybe staff submitted it. I certainly don't believe that he wrote this imaginary exchange with Jeffrey Epstein. But again, on a binary matter like this, which is different from E. Jean Carroll said X and Donald Trump said Y, that book is going to come out. We're going to see the page that purports to be from Trump. Why not simply say, I don't remember making a birthday submission, but I'm sure that I did. Given the nature of the requests that I receive, it would be highly normal for me to do so, but don't read too much into it because the guy was a crumb. And when I figured out how unsavory he was, I ghosted him. In short form, that's what he ought to be doing.
So why do you think he's not?
Okay, 2 possibilities. One, because there's something nefarious there. I don't think that's the case because although he has a fondness well documented for women and back in the day was quite the playboy and so forth, I don't think it's part of Trump's MO like it was Epstein's MO to be attracted to girls, young girls. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's something embarrassing in those files. I don't think so. And therefore, I come to the conclusion that it's just part of his Roy Cohn-inspired DNA of deny, 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 make him prove it, and never, never retreat. It served him well, and also, Mark, because perhaps nobody in the inner circle wants to tell him what I just told him because they don't want to speak truth to power, always for fear of being X'd out of the inner circle.
Right. Okay. If you could interview Trump, give me 3 questions you'd ask on this matter.
On this matter?
Yeah.
I think I'd begin by asking him, why are you denying the existence of a book that clearly the Wall Street Journal knows exists? And if you're saying something different than that, then tell us specifically exactly what that is. Secondly, I think I would want to know, relative to Epstein, I would want to know, why would you say that your name doesn't appear in a file when you would certainly recognize that hundreds, if not thousands of names would be in that file? Aren't you setting yourself up for further problems, politically speaking, on this issue? And then I would want to know specifically, what was the break in the relationship? Walk me through it.
I love all those. Here's the one I'd add, because I'd ask all 3 of yours. Tell us the story in great detail of how your relationship with Jeffrey Epstein started and what it consisted of. I'm amazed we don't know the answer to that question. How did they meet? How much time did they spend together? Why did Trump, who never flies on anyone else's plane, fly on his plane? I think my theory remains that no, he didn't break the law necessarily. There was no involvement with girls he knew to be underage, but that the relationship with Epstein was much more intense and complicated than we currently know. That's my theory. What do you think of my theory?
Complicated and intense how?
More time together.
Right.
More schemes together. More fratty schemes together. That's what I think. And I base that in part on, we have 2 accounts now on the record from women who tell stories about being in the presence of Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. And they're both fratty stories.
It makes sense. I mean, it's completely plausible. It doesn't change the advice that I'd be giving him if I were in the business of giving him advice. I, by the way, have a theory as to why Todd Blanche went to Florida and spent 2 days with Ghislaine Maxwell. Do you want to hear that?
Go on.
All right. I think he was there to collect scalps and not that of Donald Trump. I think that the mission was come home with detail of some of the others with whom Epstein had a relationship and be prepared to name names. I'm thinking of some people, but I don't want to besmirch them by naming them. But I think that's the mission, so that it can then be, Ghislaine Maxwell says Trump was a friend of Epstein, but there was nothing illicit to it. And at the same time, she says he was, and uses some of the better knowns of those who are Trump nemesis. And now all of a sudden he seeks to throw it on the Democrats.
Yeah, you have an audience that's varied. It's one of the strengths of your oeuvre, but your audience isn't super MAGA. Some of them are, but overall it's not. Is your audience interested in the Maxwell story, the Epstein story? What interests them about the Epstein story? Is it like OJ? They're just interested in it because it's a kind of a whodunit, or is there
all
other
the elements? You'd be fair to say to me, well, what makes you think that they are engaged? And I would say, anecdotally, the tone of the calls, the volume of the calls, and also the fact that Saturday's CNN poll question of the day, which asked, why did Blanche go down to Florida, had just a tick under 60,000 votes. That's a lot of votes, even though we do well on Saturdays. Yeah, people are into it. Even if they want to call me and tell me, they're not into it, or call me, take the time to call and say, why are you talking about this? I always am amused by well, why are you taking the time to call me? Why don't you call somebody else on a different issue? So no, I think it's got the elements. Now, how long it lasts, he comes home from Scotland, the House is now in recess. I'm not sure where it goes from here, but my suspicion is that it doesn't let up.
Yeah. Trump breeds the unprecedented, either by himself or by people around him. As a Philadelphia lawyer, can you think of an analog to a deputy attorney general, the number 2 person, flying and spending 2 days interviewing someone in federal custody? Can you think of an example of something like that?
Absolutely not. And certainly not a number two in the DOJ who previously was the criminal defense attorney for that figure when he was, being charged federally. And of course, I'm thinking of the Stormy Daniels case. I mean, I think it begs this question of whether Blanche was there representative of our interests as Americans in his role as the number two, or as Trump's former personal lawyer.
Yeah. And again, another unprecedented thing that the government's filled with former Trump lawyers. Like most presidents don't bring their own legal defense team into the government with them.
Most lawyers have not been represented by so many lawyers over the course of their careers.
That's
right.
True.
He's got a huge bench to pick from.
That's true.
He's picking from his past lawyers.
That's true. My past lawyers could fit in a phone booth. His past lawyers could fit in Dodger Stadium.
Right. It's true.
All right, let's move to a different why. It's something that talked about on this program and elsewhere, which is why the Democratic Party finds itself in poll after poll as having the lowest approval rating of all time. And you could say, well, they took unpopular position on immigration. You could say Joe Biden did some things that made him unpopular. But I believe it's more profound than that. And I believe it has a lot to do with Donald Trump's mastery. Doesn't win every time. They beat him in 20. They beat him in many other elections. But I believe that Donald Trump has contributed mightily to the decline of the Democratic Party. So I'll ask you, with only slightly prejudicing the jury, why do you think the Democratic Party is facing such brand crisis?
So there would be issues in the mix. If I were giving you the laundry list, and on my list would be the economy. On my list would be immigration. On my list.
Let me stop you on the economy. Do you mean specifically Joe Biden's record on inflation, or do you mean the party is not identified with positive economic ideas, or both?
Both. Okay. I think primarily it's Biden and the economy and the abandonment of a constituency that used to be Democratic largely because of economic issues. I'm thinking about blue collar, white working class whose parents all voted Democratic, and now all of a sudden they're going in a different direction. But at its core, I have a different answer. I just, by exclusion, I don't want you to think that I didn't mention anything substantive. So therefore, I'm mistaken in this. Mostly it is, what does the party stand for? Like, I know what MAGA stands for. I don't know what the Democratic Party or its leaders stand for, other than opposition to all things Donald Trump and a complete unwillingness to ever concede that maybe he was right in doing something. And I think that this shotgun approach, figuratively speaking, of everything about Trump is bad and we're going to go after him for absolutely everything he says and does, it's a boy who cried wolf.
Yeah.
So that when tomorrow they're complaining about something else instead of keeping their powder dry, it's like, oh yeah, it's coming from them. They hate him. We've heard it before. And people pay less attention to whatever the critique might be.
And the ultimate manifestation of that for me was the 4 indictments and the attempts to keep him off the ballot. That they basically decreed that Trump had to be stopped by all means necessary. And that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And you and I both hear from people all the time who say that was just a bridge too far in an election year to try to deny the voters their choice.
And let's give ourselves a little bit of credit, because when Alvin Bragg was the first one in, you and I both said, this is going to poison the well. If he doesn't come away with a conviction, or even if he does come away with a conviction, people's first impression of lawfare vis-a-vis Trump is going to be the porn star, the Stormy Daniels adult film actress case. And I think it had exactly that impact. I always believed, I think you and I disagree on this, I always believed that the cleanest case, because it was backed up by closed circuit television and text reports and so forth, was the Mar-a-Lago case. I'm not saying that I even believe it should have been brought, but I just think that from a legal perspective, it was very, very clean and in bite-sized pieces. The worst of the cases was the Stormy Daniels case. That's the one that they brought. They jumped through hoops to extend the statute of limitations, and I think it ruined any prospect of what followed it.
I agree with you about the Florida case. It's the only one I think I would have even considered bringing, and I'm not even sure I would have brought it, as you said. I want to ask you about 3 Democrats, because if you think about, okay, maybe when Trump is no longer going to be the candidate, maybe the Democratic brand can revive. I want to ask you about 3 candidates who are talked about now, to my ear, far less as potential presidential candidates than they were just a little while ago. or at least as less about as formidable potential candidates, and ask you if you agree with me, and ask why you think that is. The first is Gretchen Whitmer, governor of Michigan. I see these stories talking about 28. I don't see her name nearly as prominently as I did before. And do you agree with that? And if so, why?
I totally agree with that. You certainly don't consider her with that top tier, and I won't spoil your thunder if you're going to go to some of those other names next. Yeah. I don't think that she has distinguished herself in the way that Newsom has as being a scrapper with Trump, and I think that it's very important for Democrats or opponents of Trump generally to believe that they got somebody who's got some grit.
Yeah. The governor of your Commonwealth, Governor Shapiro, I don't hear his name. I hear his name as a possible, but I don't hear it as top tier the way I did before. And I've downgraded him from top tier. I'm wondering if you agree that he's not in the mix as much, and if so, why?
I do. I think that he's been quiet in the last couple of weeks or months. I think that's true. I don't think that he's positioned himself as a Trump critic in the way, I'll use Newsom again, that he has. Maybe it's because, unlike California, Donald Trump won this state, and maybe Governor Shapiro is just trying not to alienate the MAGA base in a way that Newsom could care less whether he does. I mean, Fetterman has walked that line in a pretty impressive fashion, being able to be independent of Democrats, buys some of it, doesn't buy some of it, and lets everybody know that he's not totally devoted one way or the other. I think maybe Shapiro looks at that model and sees that Fetterman's been able to play that very successfully, and he's just stayed away from a lot of these issues.
Yeah. The other day, Axios, a publication we both read, had a long list of different possible presidential candidates on the Democratic side, and it did not include Kamala Harris. I'm wondering if you think her name has now been downgraded, and again, if so, why?
I think it has been downgraded as people have done sort of the retrospective of what went on here in 2024, a lot of books having been written, and I think that people recognize that she was not a strong candidate. Maybe, remembering now that she dropped out in the last cycle before a single vote had been cast, I don't think that she did anything to distinguish herself in the election except raise all that money, and all that money was going to come even if Mark Halperin were running against Donald Trump, because it was fueled by people who just had such antipathy toward him. She's not that strong a candidate.
Yeah.
She's just not that strong a candidate.
Okay. Lastly, on this topic, not a why, but a who, you have to fill 5 slots, not in order, of the top tier for the Democrats, most likely nominee in 2028. Fill your 5 slots.
Well, I'm putting Shapiro on that list.
Yeah.
I am putting Newsom on that list. I'm putting Klobuchar on that list. So that's 3 of my 5.
Yeah.
Who else am I going to go for?
I'll give you a suggestion. Buttigieg?
No. I don't want any suggestions. I'm just
rewind the tape.
No, he's not on my list.
Okay.
No, he's not on my list. How does he get through South Carolina? I don't see that happening.
Okay.
I don't see that happening.
You got 2 more slots.
I know.
All right. Take your time. It's a long show.
Do you guys move at this type of pace?
Take your time.
Every week?
I'll do the Wordle while you're working. I always start Wordle with a Jew, by the way.
They always know, they'll know for sure that this is unscripted and unrehearsed, that I'm stammering, and I'd love to throw Rahm Emanuel into the mix, because that would be 4, because I maybe it's wishful thinking on my part, not that I'm here to carry his water, but I want it to be interesting.
Yeah.
I want it to be an interesting cycle.
Rahm's interesting.
Yeah. So Rahm is interesting, and he goes on that list as well. Man, oh man, there's just like nobody calling my name beyond. But I'm here to say no to Mayor Pete.
Okay.
All right, I'll give you. My heart's not in that one. I'm stopping at 4, Mark. That's all I got.
All right, since you're stopping, I'll throw one more name out that other people throw out. I don't agree. Wes Moore.
Impressive. Yeah, impressive. I don't know that I think he needs another season under his belt.
Right. So you'd rather leave the 5th slot blank than give it to Wes Moore. Okay. All right. Yeah. Now let's talk about the media. As you know, I'm a huge fan of yours. I like you personally, but I'm so impressed with what you've built. And I'm impressed because outside the people on this conversation, there are very few people trying to build a media brand on what you and I do organically. We just are interested in information and facts and great stories. And we think everybody deserves a break who's in the public arena. And we don't have animus towards them. If they do something negative, we'll call it like we see it. And you've had enormous success doing that. And I've had moderate success doing it. Why do so few organizations and individuals think that's a successful model when we both know that the largest group of Americans are the people who share our sensibility?
God, I love this question. First of all, you've sold yourself short because you're crushing it. Secondly, very quick story. I've been on Real Time with Bill Maher on a number of occasions, and they haven't all gone well. Please don't Google the first of them because you're only going to add to the count. So we started on a bad note, but I came back, and on a subsequent visit at a post-show meet and greet, he paid me the highest compliment. He said to me, "You know what I like about you? You don't have a team.
Yeah.
I don't have a team. There aren't many of us that don't have a team." I'm like,
Correct.
Oh man, that just is so damn nice what he said. Another story. I remember putting together an event 2-3 years ago in Philadelphia that was called the Unconvention, trying to spur some independent thinking. 1,000 people attended. Great success. As a favor to me, both Phil Griffin, who was my one-time boss at MSNBC when I guest hosted Hardball, and Jeff Zucker, formerly of CNN, my boss who brought me to CNN. Thank you, Jeff. I brought them both to Philadelphia. Or I should say they were willing to come. You know, they shared a car and they came to Philly and they appeared on a stage and we talked about the media for an hour. It was great. And I asked essentially your question of both of them. And I remember Jeff saying at the time, "Who am I putting on after you?" Because I said to him in similar fashion, you've got all this independent thinking in the country, 43% who tell Gallup I'm an I, not an R or a D. That's the latest number. Why not go after that audience specifically? And he was suggesting to me that there's not a talent pool in this area, which I disagree with.
Yeah.
Although, Mark, maybe a part of it is like a lot of journalism students looked at Woodward and Bernstein and decided they wanted to be investigative journalists, and then a next generation wanted to go into journalism. And they looked at a lot of loudmouths and they figured, well, that's what I have to be. I need to be caustic, and they imitated that model. I think it could work. And what we need to disabuse people of is the idea that there's no passion in the middle. I mean, you know me. I'm passionate about all sorts of things. They don't just line up neatly in some artificial ideological boxes.
I agree with everything you said, as is often the case, but this is what's confusing to me because you are passionate. You are a great broadcaster. Your super fans are as passionate about you as anyone I know in the media, truly, except maybe Hannity. But after Hannity, you'd be number 2. And yet, very few people do what we do. And yet, again, when you and I do public events, invariably one or more people say, I don't like all the shouting. I don't like the extreme left or right. I just want the facts. I'm interested in hearing opposing points of view treated with respect. Why isn't there more of that? And I can't figure it out. There's tens of millions of people who want this. You provide it and are rewarded. Why aren't more people trying it?
Mark, I think passion resides on the ends of the political spectrum. And I think that the clearest way to mouse clicks and eyeballs on television and ears on radio is to be doctrinaire. You might not have a cross-section of the audience, which I know is what I'd like, and I think what you would probably like, but there's going to be a hardcore number of people there who are the type to put up the yard sign, write the check, vote in every election, and therefore you're providing them with the chum in the water that they desire to keep coming back for a confirmation of their already existing belief system. The harder thing to do is to be independent, progressive on something, conservative on something. You like this personality, you might not like that one. Totally running contrary to putting on the uniform of one's team.
I agree with you that the other thing's a business because we see it's a business.
It's a business.
But
successful business.
Our thing should be a business too for more people than just
Amen.
us.
Amen. By the way, I'd love to laugh all the way to the bank with a message of unifying the country.
Yeah, I agree with you. All right, last question. What are the 3 most underrated things about Philadelphia?
Location. I mean, it's just so damn convenient in terms of being able to go to the beach, go to the mountains, get to New York City, get down to Washington. So
it's a great staging area.
It's a great staging area.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, okay. I don't mean to diminish. What's here.
That's a good one.
There's in political terms, there's an authenticity to this town that might sometimes be offensive, but I think it's really admirable. I really
totally
do.
agree with you. It's one of the most real cities in the country. Really
and
is.
I'm also and frankly, I don't know anything else because I've spent my entire life in a 50-mile radius growing up, going to undergraduate, going to law school, working. This is all I've ever been. I've always I got like 5 choices of what to give you now. Westmore might be one of them. But I think I'm going to go with neighborhoods. And I don't just limit that to the city. I extend that to the burbs as well. I just love how it's a really cool place because it's got a flavor that's different wherever you move just a couple of miles away. So authenticity, location, I should have said authenticity first, and also it's a collection of neighborhoods that are all very unique.
If you ever retire, will you still live there?
I don't expect to leave ever, but I'd like to have a second home somewhere. Can I go to the beach and come back?
You may.
Yeah, I'm never leaving here. I could have left here on any number of occasions, but no, I'm not leaving. I'm totally wed to this area.
Yeah. So the big 4, the so-called 4 horsemen of the Philadelphia apocalypse it's Julius Erving, Will Smith, Rocky, and Michael Smerconish. Those are the big 4.
I'd take that. I'd be in good company.
Yeah, Michael, very grateful to you for making time, and you owe me only about 118 appearances for reciprocity. For my
this is
being
fun.
on your show.
Come on,
but
this is fun.
Grateful to you for coming on. And again, you can listen to Michael every weekday, 9 to noon Eastern on Sirius XM, and then Saturday mornings on CNN at 9 Eastern. If you like Michael and you want to show him proper respect, you need to patronize all 16 hours every week.
Thank you for that.
Okay. Michael, thank you. Great.
Thank you.
All right. That concludes today's episode. We're going to be back on Thursday, of course, with a brand new episode. Make sure to subscribe and download Next Up, wherever you get your podcasts, so you always know what is coming next up.